Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera, and I am the host today. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today, we are honored to have renowned legal scholar, Boston University Law School Professor Tamar Frankel.
Thank you.
Professor, thank you so much for joining us. You are here to talk to us about the Ponzi scheme puzzle and about your book, one of your many books.
Okay.
Professor, let me ask you, what is a Ponzi scheme?
Okay. A Ponzi scheme is a scheme in which a con artist, a dishonest person, offers investments that promise extraordinary returns at very low risk. And presumably, the return derives from a business or a product or some financial arrangement. But in fact, none of these sources is the income. The money to pay the current investors comes from new investors that he raises or she raises the money from. So this is what a Ponzi scheme is. It backs nothing.
I see, Professor. Professor, who was Ponzi?
Ponzi was an Italian person who came and had real charisma and ideas, all of which failed. And so he continued to draw investors even after the failures because he was so good at it. So we called the scheme after him, but it existed many, many years before.
And Professor, are Ponzi schemes a new phenomenon?
Oh, no. It is a very old phenomenon, as a matter of fact. There is a story that a former president of the United States in 1884 fell for such a scheme. So it is not new by a long shot.
Who are the victims in a Ponzi scheme?
They are everybody. They can be both wealthy and well-informed individuals. They can be middle and low-income people who invest their few savings. There's no distinction here. The victims also include banks. There were a story of 8 banks that these Ponzi schemers came to, and the banks thought that each of them has checked. None of them has, as a result of it, checked. And they paid these people for the investments, then found out that the investments were in India. And when the payment stopped, they went to India, and they found that there were no businesses and no money, nothing. It was a story.
Professor, so Ponzi schemes are not unique to the United States?
Oh, no, not by a long shot. They have attracted investors in Russia, in India, in Albania, in Romania. There were riots afterwards. In Portugal, in Costa Rica, in Haiti, in Australia, everywhere.
And Professor, how do they do it?
Well, it is a combination of things. Number one, they offer unique returns that are astronomical. For example, 10% a month, when a bank rate is 5 to 10% a year, or 40% within 6 to 8 weeks, or payment of $9,000 or on an investment of $23,000 in 30 days. So this is one unique part of it. Most of these promises involve also very short-term investment. So you have a kind of less risk. You think, I'll get my money back quite soon. And therefore, the other thing is the payments are prompt. As a matter of fact, one con artist says, we always pay on time and regularly until there's a stop, until there's nothing.
And Professor, how do these people gain this sophisticated individual's trust?
Well, there are a number of aspects to this. Number one, they offer a variety of stories. For example, investing in synthetic rubies, in tropical islands, equipment for outer space, trading in bus stop shelters, investing in gold mine, in oil, in telecommunication. And most of these stories share an important feature. They are exceptional, they are creative, they are exciting. In addition, con artists use stories that are very costly to verify. The gold mines are hard to find, and the source of income is in faraway lands such as Thailand, Hong Kong, Malaysia, hard to get.
But Professor, how do the Ponzi schemer artists get their victims? How do they know that you are a target or anyone?
They get their trust in various ways. Sometimes, and this is unique, sometimes they tell a story that has somewhat, not much, of illegality. And therefore, there is some danger, but there's also the signal, here, I tell you, I trust you, I tell you about this. And so I told you first, right? So now you should trust me too. And there is also friendship. It is together with the appearance of wealth. The con artist seems to be just as wealthy as the potential victims. He shows no inclination or desire to advise his victims, and let alone to manage his friends' assets. But sometimes he may be convinced to do so as a favor. And that is because he's so successful and they ask him so much, so he agrees.
And how is the story told?
The lifeline of these Ponzi schemers is publicity and reputation. So they must make their offering as public as possible because they need a lot of investors, one after another. And so they live in the right neighborhoods, they rub shoulders with the right kind of people, they become members of exclusive clubs where the wealthy congregate, and they show generosity and engage in civic activities, and all is publicized.
And Professor, why is it difficult to distinguish, or is it difficult to distinguish a real Ponzi schemer from some real investment?
Well, most of these investments are, number one, similar. Although I described they may not be very easy to find. But in addition, maybe I should also add one more thing. The Ponzi scheme starts with family and friends. And soon the word gets around. And the next promising investors are then institutions, but usually not institutions that are well regulated like banks. That's unusual. These are usually institutions of charitable organizations or of religious organizations where the members talk to each other, trust each other, they tell the story. And so that is the way the con artist discloses and gets the investors. And in addition, the con artist draws immigrants from their own home country. So in November 2005, a Filipino man confessed to defrauding hundreds of middle and low-income investors, most of whom were members of the Filipino community in San Diego. So it is easy, they follow those whom they know. But the most effective way to distribute is, of course, sales. And they have salespeople. I don't know if you heard about, I think everybody has heard about, well, an important, never mind about an important Madoff. Yes, he managed to get investments from salespeople and from sales organization, and he got an enormous amount of money that way for almost 20 years. So why is it difficult to distinguish these con artists? Well, one reason for the difficulty is that in many respects, they behave similarly to the behavior of anybody else. I mean, after all, humans have a natural ability to pretend. You know, a child takes a banana and says, hello. Yes, the child does something which is innate in the person. And that is one thing. Besides, we don't always kind of tell the truth. We laugh at jokes that we don't think is funny. But we do that because of other reasons. So that is one thing. The second is that most of the structure and image of these Ponzi schemes can be legitimate. It can be true. It's not that they're absolutely not true. And even business failures are not unique. We see them from time to time. So if one fails, okay, that happens. So in addition, many of these con artists behave like entrepreneurs. Like entrepreneurs. They are inventors. And we admire people with imagination and with creativity.
Today, we have a very special guest. We're honored to have renowned legal scholar, Professor Tamar Frankel, a professor from Boston University Law School. And she's here to talk to us about one of our many books, The Ponzi Scheme Puzzle. And this episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Professor Frankel, who are these Ponzi schemers? What kind of people are these con artists?
Well,
and their victims?
They are, in many respects, different from most people. First of all, they despise their own victims. They think humanity's weakness, one of them explained, and they boast of their ability to defraud others. They usually deny that they've done anything wrong. They blame the law, they blame the government, they blame the victims. They're stupid, the victims. How could they believe a scam like mine? That's one of them says. And so they're greedy, those victims. In the late 1800s, a prominent con artist was quoted as saying, "Each of my victims has larceny," that means stealing, in his heart. He blamed them. So it seems as if they are also repeat offenders. There was one person who spent 7 years in prison for fraud. Then he spent 10 years as a fraud investigator. And yet he did it again. And in April 2011, he pleaded guilty to a stock fraud conspiracy again. So these are the differences between usual people and con artists.
And what about their victims, Professor? Who are they typically?
Well, first I want to say I don't blame victims. They're victims. And I'm sorry that they fell for these plans. But there are two types of victims, really. One type is less wealthy and is sophisticated and less sophisticated. These are followers of the affinity groups, the religious people, and so on. The second type is sophisticated victims. They react differently. The first type follow the con artists even after they were robbed. They still follow. They admire. The sophisticated victims blame themselves. They are shameful. And they expect their family and friends to say, "How could you be so stupid?" They expect no sympathy and no fury at the con artists. They blame themselves. But they are driven by two strong tendencies: a high level of trust and risk tolerance. They love taking risk. And these victims are drawn also to small, select group. When you think about how Bernard Madoff did it, he had groups of 6, 7 people. They felt they were very unique. They didn't know that he had many such groups, but he wouldn't accept more than 6 in a group. So you were very, very special, and he touched something that these people feel they need to be special.
Professor, what do we learn from this, from all this?
Oh, we can learn a great deal. So one thing we can learn is that con artists that do mirror trustworthy people, and that deceitful actions can resemble legitimate activities. And those who seem to be entrepreneurs may produce nothing. So in other words, we learn that not everything that seems is really so. That is one thing. Promises may be extraordinary profits, but they can really be false. And following others may be efficient, but also dangerous if we follow blindly. So we recognize con artists are addicted to the game and can corrupt others as well. So recognizing that trust and honesty are indeterminate, and realizing that people follow many routes with different measures of truth, we may conclude that a little dishonesty will always be with us, so a little dishonesty is acceptable or even justified. Everybody does just a little bit. I believe that here lies our greatest danger. A society that accepts just a little dishonesty as a way of life is headed towards deception and abuse of trust on a grand scale. That's just the beginning. And because con artists resemble us, the true danger is that we might begin to resemble them. So how can people protect themselves from financial fraud? I, of course, don't know the answer. I don't know that anybody else knows the answer. But I would like to give a suggestion, a limited suggestion. We must recognize our own vulnerability to con artists. They have an allure, and we must do that. We must recognize it. In Greece, many years ago, the temple of Apollo carried an inscription, "Know thyself," know yourself, know your own. Even the greatest Achilles, he was great, he was powerful, he had an Achilles heel. He had some weakness, and we all do. So we may read or be told about a person who became a millionaire in no time. We may wish to become millionaires too. But if someone with the characteristics of a con artist approaches us with a great tempting offer, or if our friends tell us about a wonderful once upon a time, once opportunity, we may stop and consider our own tendencies and say, "Not now, thank you. Let me think about it."
And Professor, with that, I'm going to tempt you with the apple of temptation.
It's very hard to try and taste it.
The Institute for Fiduciary Standard. What is this, Professor?
A few years ago, people who manage a lot of other people's money, not little, but a lot, established an institute. Fiduciary duties mean that these people say we'll be trustworthy, not because of forcing, but because we want to force ourselves or to limit ourselves, not to force. And that is one, it's an apple that we will not bite.
The apple of temptation.
The apple of temptation.
Professor Frankel, we are so honored that you were able to talk to us about this really important and interesting topic.
Thank you.
This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today we had Professor Tamar Frankel, author of The Ponzi Scheme, one of her many books. My name is Lucy Rivera, and please visit us, and thank you for watching.